There's a strange pattern hiding inside human history. The people who understood the world most clearly were often the people who understood other people the least, not because they lacked feeling, but because of what happened inside a mind built to see too much. Isaac Newton never married. He rarely left his rooms at Cambridge, sometimes forgetting to eat while chasing a single idea for days. Nikola Tesla, the man who helped electrify the modern world, died alone in a hotel room, talking more openly to the pigeons he fed than to most people he knew. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most quoted minds in history, spent his final lucid years writing letters that almost no one answered. These weren't broken men. They were, by every available measure, brilliant ones. And yet each of them, in his own way, ended up profoundly alone. For a long time, we've told ourselves a comforting story about this, that genius requires sacrifice, that the mind and the heart can't both be fully occupied at once. But that story is too simple. Something more specific is happening, something psychologists have only recently started to measure. Ask someone who tested into the gifted program in 3rd grade what childhood felt like, and you'll often hear the same phrase in different words. I knew something was different before I knew what it was. That difference usually isn't arrogance, it's timing. A highly intelligent child processes patterns, contradictions, and consequences faster than the room around them. They notice the adult lying before the adult finishes the sentence. They see the plot twist in the film 10 minutes early. They ask the question that makes the classroom go quiet, not to show off, but because the question was simply the next honest thing to say. Over time, a quiet lesson gets learned. Slow down, or be left standing alone in the conversation. Many intelligent people spend years translating themselves downward, not because they're condescending, but because full-speed honesty tends to isolate them faster than anything else they could do. In 2016, 2 researchers, Norman Lee of Singapore Management University and Satoshi Kanazawa of the London School of Economics, analyzed data from over 15,000 young American adults, testing something they called the Savannah theory of happiness. The idea is unsettling in its simplicity. Our brains evolved to feel content under Stone Age conditions, and those old settings still quietly run in the background of modern life. For most people, the data confirmed what we'd expect. More time with close friends meant more reported life satisfaction. But for the most intelligent participants, that relationship weakened, and in some cases reversed. The more often highly intelligent people socialized, the less satisfied they tended to report feeling. Read that again, because it isn't saying intelligent people don't need connection. It's saying their satisfaction depends less on frequency and more on depth, and modern social life is built almost entirely around frequency. Population density told a similar story. Most people are less happy the more crowded their environment becomes, but highly intelligent participants were far less bothered by crowding, as though their minds had built an internal escape hatch that let them tune out the noise most people can't ignore. Put these 2 findings together and a pattern emerges. Intelligence doesn't remove the need for connection. It changes its shape entirely. To understand why, you have to go back further than psychology, back to the environment our brains were actually built for. For most of human history, we lived in small bands of maybe 50 to 150 people, the same faces every day, survival depending on tight cooperation. In that world, being unusual was expensive. A person who saw the world differently, who questioned the tribe's assumptions, risked exile, and exile on the savannah could mean death. So what human brains evolved a strong automatic pull toward blending in, toward reading the room and matching it. But evolution doesn't produce identical copies. A small percentage of any population always drifts from the average, in height, in temperament, in raw processing power. For most of these outliers, that gap was mildly inconvenient. For the most cognitively different, it created a strange kind of exile that didn't require anyone to banish them. They simply stopped being fully understood by the group around them, and the ancient part of the brain that needs tribal belonging never got the signal that it was safe to stop searching. That's the quiet tragedy hiding inside high intelligence. It can outgrow the very environment designed to keep it emotionally safe. Newton's peers described him as intensely private, more at ease with equations than people,
uncomfortable in nearly every social setting he entered. Tesla could hold entire conversations with investors and journalists, but confided that meaningful closeness felt almost impossible to sustain. He once wrote that solitude was the essential condition for the deepest kind of work. Nietzsche is perhaps the most haunting case. He wrote entire philosophies about the loneliness of original thought, the idea that anyone who climbs high enough above the crowd will eventually find the air too thin for company. Late in his life, he described the specific ache of being surrounded by acquaintances and still feeling like the only person in the room who could see what he saw. None of these men set out to be isolated. Each of them, in his own words, wanted to be understood. What separated them from the average person wasn't a lack of desire for connection. It was a mind that kept outrunning the conversations available to it. Here's the part that's easy to misunderstand. This isn't about intelligent people believing they're better than everyone else. It's about a mismatch in processing speed and depth that most
social environments simply aren't built to hold. Small talk exists as social glue, low stakes, low effort, designed to signal I mean you no harm without requiring real vulnerability. For someone whose mind is constantly hunting for the next layer beneath the surface, small talk can feel like being asked to run a marathon in first gear. Not beneath them, just draining in a way that's hard to explain without sounding ungrateful for the company. Add to this something researchers call asynchronous understanding, the experience of reaching a conclusion, an emotion, or a joke's punchline several steps before the room does. Do it once and you're quick-witted. Do it constantly, for years, and you start editing yourself before you speak, just to keep the gap from showing. That editing is exhausting, and exhaustion, repeated daily, quietly turns into distance. But here's where the story bends in a direction most people don't expect. Solitude, for a mind built like this, isn't only a wound, it's also where the real work happens. Newton did his most important thinking not in company, but during an extended stretch of enforced isolation when Cambridge closed during an outbreak of plague. Alone, with no lectures, no distractions, just time to think. Some of his most foundational insights trace back to that solitary stretch. Modern research on solitude backs this up. Deep, undistracted thought, the kind that produces breakthroughs rather than reactions, requires exactly the conditions solitude provides. No social monitoring, no performance, no need to translate your thinking into something instantly palatable to a group. Psychologists studying highly creative and highly intelligent populations have repeatedly found the same thing. Solitude isn't merely tolerated by these minds, it's often where they do their best, most honest work. The loneliness is real, but so is the trade it's quietly making, depth in exchange for constant company. If any of this sounds familiar, the goal isn't to force yourself into more small talk or to convince yourself you don't need people at all. Both are ways of running from the actual issue. The more useful move is to stop optimizing for quantity of connection and start deliberately building for depth. Seek out the handful of people, sometimes it really is only 2 or 3 in an entire lifetime, who can meet you at full speed without you having to slow down. Protect solitude on purpose, not as a retreat from failure, but as a tool you choose, the same way Newton did. And when you do find someone who keeps up, who asks the second question instead of stopping at the first, treat that as rarer than it feels. It is. Maybe the question was never why do smart people end up alone? Maybe the real question is, what would it look like if we stopped asking brilliant minds to slow down and started building rooms fast enough